Did you happen to catch what took place once the recording equipment stopped capturing footage? I'm not referring to the specific chair shots that transpired, nor am I talking about the security personnel who rushed in to separate the competitors. What I want to direct your attention toward is that particular instance when Cody Rhodes gazed down upon the severely injured body of Randy Orton, fully comprehending the gravity of what his own actions had just accomplished, and made the conscious decision to continue with his assault. That wasn't simply a man seeking retribution for past wrongs. That was something far more sinister. That was a man attempting to eliminate something that had been festering deep within his own psyche, something he had been battling internally for years. And this brings us to the central question that should be occupying everyone's thoughts but hasn't been properly addressed by the wrestling community. What if what transpired wasn't merely an attack by Cody Rhodes on Randy Orton? What if on a deeper level, Cody was attacking the singular person who understood him more intimately than anyone else on this planet could? And in executing this assault, what if he managed to destroy the final shred of his own humanity that he had been desperately trying to preserve and protect throughout his entire career? There exists something fundamentally different in the atmosphere that now permeates professional wrestling after that particular episode of Smackdown that took place in Boston. The crowd assembled inside the TD Garden Arena experienced it viscerally. Every security guard who rushed desperately to pull Cody away from Orton's limp body felt it in their bones. And somewhere deep within that massive arena, I genuinely believe that Cody Rhodes himself felt this profound shift taking place within his own spirit. This wasn't merely another installment in what has been a 2-decade-long history between these two competitors. This represented something far more significant and consequential. This was the precise moment when the American Nightmare ceased to be the protagonist of his own narrative. Because when you examine the footage closely, when you really study the expression in his eyes, when you take time to truly understand what was happening in that moment, you come to realize that Cody wasn't attempting to terminate Randy Orton's career or end his time in professional wrestling. No, something much darker was occurring. He was attempting to eliminate and destroy the part of himself that still possessed the capacity to care about another human being. Let me set the scene properly for you so that you can fully comprehend the context surrounding these events. The episode of Smackdown that aired on August 14th was originally scheduled to showcase a match between Cody Rhodes and Sami Zayn, a crucial #1 contenders match that would ultimately determine which competitor would earn the opportunity to challenge CM Punk for the prestigious undisputed WWE Championship. That was the plan heading into the evening. That was what management had organized and what the audience had been informed would take place. However, Randy Orton had formulated an entirely different agenda for the evening. As Sami Zayn was making his way down to the ring for his scheduled match, executing his entrance routine and connecting with the crowd, Randy Orton, often referred to throughout wrestling as the Viper due to his snake-like striking approach, made his presence known in the most disruptive way possible. He emerged from behind Cody Rhodes without warning, launching a devastating surprise attack. The Viper executed one of his signature maneuvers, a draping DDT, which sent Cody Rhodes crashing violently shoulder-first into one of the rigid steel ring posts that constitute the structural framework of the wrestling ring. The impact was severe and unforgiving. What followed this initial attack was nothing short of complete and utter pandemonium. The two competitors spilled out of the ring and into the surrounding crowd, brawling through the audience with reckless abandon. Orton orchestrated a tactical maneuver where he positioned Cody in an extremely precarious position, wedging him between the announce table where the commentators sit and the steel steps that lead up into the ring. Once he had Cody secured in this compromised position, Orton reached down and retrieved a steel chair, that iconic weapon that has been used throughout professional wrestling history to inflict maximum damage. But Cody, drawing upon his own tactical knowledge and instincts honed through years of professional wrestling experience, managed to prevent the attack. He delivered a low kick to Orton's midsection, causing the Viper to drop the chair. Seizing this opportunity, Cody grabbed the weapon and began unleashing a series of absolutely brutal strikes and blows upon his opponent. The chair made sickening contact repeatedly with Orton's body as the crowd began to erupt. Security personnel from multiple angles of the arena swarmed toward the scene, desperate to regain control of the situation before someone sustained a career-threatening injury. Before the Smackdown broadcast could continue or conclude properly, security had successfully separated the two competitors and the show went off the air. But here's what really matters, and what the television cameras and broadcast footage didn't fully manage to capture in its entirety. The assault didn't conclude when the cameras stopped rolling, or when the official broadcast feed went dark. Cody Rhodes continued with his violent attack even after Smackdown had ended its broadcast. Security personnel were literally forced to carry Randy Orton over their collective shoulders, transporting him through the backstage areas to receive medical attention. Meanwhile, back in the ring, Cody stood alone, taunting his injured rival, verbally challenging Orton to return so that he could continue the assault. This is what people need to comprehend, and yet it's what the wrestling community has largely failed to discuss in any meaningful way. Cody Rhodes spent his entire professional career constructing an image of himself as the virtuous competitor. He departed from WWE years ago when he felt he had unfinished business in the company. He went out into the world and rebuilt himself from absolute nothing, working tirelessly and gaining experience in promotions around the globe. He ultimately returned to WWE to complete what he had started, to fulfill his narrative, and to finally achieve the pinnacle of professional wrestling success. He became the champion that his late father Dusty Rhodes always believed he possessed the capability of becoming. But then Randy Orton orchestrated his interference in Cody's championship pursuit. He cost Cody the title when it mattered most at the enormous SummerSlam event that draws millions of viewers. Orton mocked him, humiliated him in front of massive audiences. He made Cody feel diminished, made him question everything he had worked toward. And during recent interviews and interactions, Cody has explicitly stated, spoken out loud for everyone to hear, that he is no longer bound by the constraints of being the good guy. He no longer has to play the role of the hero and the upstanding competitor. But here lies the fundamental paradox that nobody seems to understand. When you make the declaration that you're no longer going to be the good guy anymore, when you announce to the world that you're shedding that identity, you don't actually get to choose what you become in that transformation. You don't get to select from a menu of appealing alternatives. Transformation isn't something you can control once you set it in motion. And based on everything we witnessed occurring in the city of Boston, Cody Rhodes may have just traversed a boundary, a line in the sand that he will find impossible to uncross no matter how much time passes or how many matches he wins. I need you to really construct this scene in your mind's eye and visualize what transpired. The security guards had already managed to confiscate the chair as a weapon. The live broadcast of Smackdown had concluded and was no longer being recorded. The show was finished. And yet, regardless of all of this, Cody Rhodes continued to strike. He positioned himself on top of the announce table, the desk where the commentators sit and provide commentary for the matches, and he continued to drive his fists downward into Orton's head repeatedly. The fans in the arena were cheering intensely. They had been anticipating this moment. They had been waiting for years for Cody to finally unleash this level of aggression. They wanted to see him take matters into his own hands and deal with Randy Orton on his own terms. But if you really study and examine the way that Cody's body was moving during this assault, if you pay close attention to his technique and demeanor, you can perceive something that goes beyond simple righteous fury or justified anger. There was something considerably darker at play. It looked disturbingly similar to desperation. It had the appearance of a man who was fighting against something internal, something within himself. And then he transitioned his movement. He rolled back into the wrestling ring proper. He directed taunts toward Orton. He screamed out loud, his voice hoarse with emotion, demanding that Orton get back up and return to fight him, insisting that they continue their struggle. But Orton physically couldn't comply with these demands. He was being supported and carried toward the backstage area by security personnel, barely maintaining consciousness, his body incapacitated by the damage he had sustained. And Cody was left in that ring, standing completely alone, his chest heaving from exertion, his eyes wild with an intensity that was difficult to categorize. Yet if you examine that specific moment with particular care, if you really dedicate yourself to studying what was occurring, you can identify a perceptible shift happening in Cody's facial expression. It wasn't the look of satisfaction that you'd expect. It wasn't the expression of someone who had achieved victory. It was something that appeared considerably closer to fear. It seemed like pure, unadulterated terror. Because in that precise moment, I genuinely believe that something clicked in Cody Rhodes' consciousness. I think he achieved a realization, an understanding so profound that it shook him to his core. In that moment, Cody Rhodes comprehended that he had transformed into the very entity, the very type of person, that he had made solemn vows throughout his entire career that he would never become. I've been contemplating this situation nonstop since it occurred, analyzing it from every conceivable angle, and I've arrived at what I believe is the critical insight that everyone else has been overlooking and avoiding. Cody Rhodes has been carrying the enormous weight of his father's legacy upon his shoulders his entire professional life. Dusty Rhodes, famously known as the American Dream, was the son of someone who worked in the plumbing industry, an ordinary working man who rose to become an extraordinary professional wrestler. He was the common man hero, the person who inspired millions because he never surrendered, he never gave up regardless of the circumstances. And throughout his career, Cody has spent countless years, expended enormous energy, attempting to live up to this enormous shadow, attempting to honor his father's memory and fulfill the promise that his father saw in him. However, Randy Orton has always been the one singular person who possessed the unique ability to penetrate beneath Cody's exterior and access the vulnerable parts of his psyche. Orton was more than just a rival or an opponent. He was Cody's mentor at various points in their career. He was someone Cody considered an ally. He was someone Cody trusted. And then eventually and inevitably, Orton became his betrayer. Orton understands precisely which psychological buttons to push. He knows exactly what will get under Cody's skin because they have spent so much time together, because they have developed such intricate knowledge of each other's psychology. When Orton orchestrated the events that cost Cody the championship at SummerSlam, he didn't merely take away a championship title or a trophy or a physical symbol. He didn't just interfere in a professional match. Something far more significant was stolen in that moment. Orton essentially took away Cody's core identity. Because fundamentally, without the title, without the active pursuit of his narrative as the American Nightmare, without the story that has defined his career trajectory, who exactly is Cody Rhodes? Strip away all of that and what remains? A man who has been chasing the ghost of his deceased father his entire existence. A man who has defined his entire purpose through the lens of fulfilling his father's vision. And when Orton demonstrated to Cody that despite all of his accomplishments, despite all of his success, despite everything he had overcome and achieved, he could still be defeated, still be humiliated, still be made to experience that same feeling of inadequacy he felt as a kid, something fundamental fractured inside of him. The professional wrestling internet and the online wrestling community have already begun classifying this moment as a heel turn, using the wrestling terminology for when a good guy character transforms into a bad guy or villainous character. But I don't think the situation is that straightforward or simple. A traditional heel turn is calculated and methodical. It's a deliberate choice made by a performer, orchestrated by management, presented to the audience in a planned manner. What we witnessed occurring in Boston wasn't calculated in any way. It wasn't planned or orchestrated. It was a man losing control. It was a man who has spent years, literally decades, being the hero, being the role model, being the good guy that everyone looked up to. He was finally reaching a breaking point. He was finally snapping under the accumulated weight of it all, under the pressure of maintaining that image, under the burden of living up to impossible standards. And this is what really penetrates my consciousness and troubles me most profoundly. Nick Aldis, who holds the position of WWE General Manager and makes the major decisions regarding match bookings and programming, has already made an official announcement regarding an upcoming match. He has scheduled a match for Sunday Night Main Event, a premium wrestling program that will take place on September 6th in Atlanta, Georgia, which happens to be Cody's hometown. It will be Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton, a rematch of their recent encounters. But after everything we have witnessed, after seeing what occurred in Boston, there are serious questions about whether this match will even materialize as scheduled. Will Randy Orton receive medical clearance from the WWE physicians to compete? Will the physicians determine that he is healthy enough and recovered sufficiently from the injuries he sustained? And perhaps more importantly, if Orton does receive clearance and the match does take place as scheduled, what version of Cody Rhodes is going to show up to that ring in Atlanta? Will it be the American Nightmare, the hero version, the performer who fights for his legacy and for the memory of his father? Or will it be the man who stood over his broken mentor, the man who screamed for him to get up so that he could inflict more punishment upon him? These are the questions that are currently unanswered. Here's a specific detail that most casual fans and even many dedicated wrestling followers managed to miss or overlook. After the broadcast concluded, after the show had gone off the air, after Orton had been transported to the backstage area by security personnel to receive medical attention, Cody stood alone in that ring and taunted his opponent. He wanted Orton to return. He desired to continue fighting. He was pleading with Orton to come back into the ring so that they could continue their struggle. But Orton was physically incapable of complying with these demands. His body had been damaged. He was broken in that moment and he couldn't return. And in that specific instant, in that particular moment when Cody was standing alone in the ring and Orton was being carried away, Cody didn't project the appearance of a man who had achieved victory. He didn't look triumphant or satisfied. He looked terrified. He appeared to be experiencing profound fear, because in that moment, a terrible realization was dawning on him. He comprehended that without Orton, without this rivalry that had come to define so much of his career trajectory, without the man who had pushed him to this extreme edge, he is fundamentally alone. He's simply a man standing in an empty ring with nothing left to prove and no one left to fight. He's a man with no purpose anymore. He's a man with no direction. He's a man who has burned every bridge and severed every connection that mattered to him. And that represents the most isolated, the loneliest, the most devastating place that any human being could find themselves in. So what transpires from this point forward? The match scheduled for September 6th for Sunday Night Main Event is officially on the books. It's been announced. The decision has been made, but will Orton actually be medically cleared to participate? Will he recover from his injuries sufficiently? Will Cody even show up to that event? Will he appear ready to compete, or will he back away from the situation? And critically, if they do manage to meet again in that ring, what version of the American Nightmare are we going to witness? Will it be the hero who fights desperately to restore his legacy and reclaim what was taken from him? Or will it be the man who has come to realize and understand that the only viable method of protecting himself from further pain and humiliation is to systematically destroy everyone who ever knew him, everyone who understands his vulnerabilities? One thing is absolutely certain at this point. The Cody Rhodes who departed from Boston following that episode of Smackdown is not the same man who arrived there. He has been fundamentally altered by his actions and by the realizations those actions precipitated. His character has shifted. His perspective has changed. And when he finally breaks his silence, when he decides to speak publicly about everything that has transpired, when he addresses the wrestling world and explains his thoughts and feelings, the entire landscape of professional wrestling is going to undergo a significant transformation. People are going to discover that certain lines, once they have been crossed, cannot be uncrossed no matter how much effort is expended in trying to undo what has been done. The fundamental question that we're all grappling with now is straightforward but loaded with implications. Did Cody Rhodes take his actions too far? Did he cross an ethical line that perhaps shouldn't have been crossed? Or was this response exactly what Randy Orton deserved based on his interference and his actions toward Cody? Was this justified retaliation? And when these two competitors meet again on that September 6th episode of Sunday Night Main Event, who will emerge victorious? Will it be the legend killer, Randy Orton's namesake, the man known for his devastating techniques and his ability to defeat superior opponents? Or will Cody Rhodes prove victorious, having completed his transformation into the entity he always swore he would never become? Let me offer some additional perspective on the historical context of these two competitors. Randy Orton has been a fundamental part of professional wrestling for an extraordinarily long time. He's been a main event player, a championship holder, and someone who has faced virtually every top competitor that WWE has produced in recent decades. He knows the business inside and out. He understands psychology. He comprehends how to manipulate an opponent both physically and mentally. Cody Rhodes, on the other hand, carried with him the burden of his father's legacy, but he also carried something else. He carried hope. He carried the belief that he could honor his father's memory while also carving his own path. He represented something different in the current era of professional wrestling. He represented a competitor who had left the company, succeeded elsewhere, and returned to finish his story. It's a narrative that has resonated with audiences because it feels authentic. Because it represents the struggle of someone trying to live up to expectations while also establishing his own identity separate from his father. The collision between these two philosophies, these two approaches to professional wrestling, has created the perfect storm. Randy Orton, with his veteran cunning, attacked the one thing that made Cody special. He went after his championship opportunity. He went after his narrative, and by doing so he forced Cody into a position where he had to choose between maintaining his carefully constructed image or releasing years of pent-up frustration and anger. What makes this situation so compelling and so tragic is that both competitors had been connected throughout their history. They had worked together, they had aligned at various points. Their relationship had layers and complexity. It wasn't simply two random wrestlers who happened to have a disagreement. This was personal. This was rooted in years of interactions, alliances, and betrayals. The wrestling community has spent decades celebrating competitors who operate in shades of gray, who aren't purely good or purely evil but who exist somewhere in between. However, what we're witnessing with Cody's transformation transcends that traditional characterization. This isn't a strategic move. This isn't a calculated character progression. This is someone coming apart at the seams. And that's what makes it so difficult to look away from. That's what makes it so compelling as a narrative. We're watching a man grapple with his own demons, with his own internal struggles, manifested through the physical violence of professional wrestling. The broadcast production quality, the crowd reactions, the security responses, all of these elements contributed to making the moment impactful. But what truly made it resonate was the psychological component. It was understanding that something had broken inside Cody Rhodes, something that might never fully heal. As we await further developments, as we wait to see what transpires at Sunday Night Main Event on September 6th in Atlanta, we're left in a state of uncertainty. We don't know if Orton will be cleared. We don't know what Cody will do. We don't know if their paths will cross again or if this moment will define the remainder of their careers. What we do know is that the landscape has shifted. The wrestling world has been altered, and no matter what happens next, the events of that Boston Smackdown episode will be remembered as a turning point, a moment when everything changed. So what do you think about all of this? Do you believe that Cody Rhodes went too far in his response to Orton's actions? Or do you think that Orton had this coming to him, that he deserved to experience the wrath of someone he had wronged so profoundly? And when these two finally meet again in that Atlanta ring, who do you think will walk away victorious? Who will be standing tall? Will it be the legend killer or will it be the man who just became the very thing he swore he would never turn into? Your thoughts and perspectives matter. Let me know in the comments section below what you're thinking. And if you want to be among the first to know what unfolds when the American Nightmare finally decides to break his silence and speak openly about everything that has transpired, if you want to hear the real narrative behind this war and rivalry, not just the recaps that other channels produce, not just the headlines you'll see reported elsewhere, but the authentic story with genuine insight and analysis, then you know what you need to do. Subscribe to WWE Vlog right now. Hit that notification bell so that you receive notifications whenever new content drops. Enable all notifications so that you never miss a single update. And let's watch this chaos unfold together, because after everything that has happened in Boston, nothing in professional wrestling will ever remain the same as it was before. The American Nightmare has awakened something inside himself, and we're all about to witness what emerges from that awakening. I'll be back with another update in the very near future. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching and keep your eyes locked on WWE Vlog for all the latest developments in this incredible and developing story.